A paper sits in the Nature Geoscience Archive. October 2022. Airborne radar found a river 460 kilometers long, hidden beneath the Antarctic ice. Lead author, Dr. Christine Dow, University of Waterloo. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 AD, banned, hidden, called dangerous by the Church. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 sealed the continent to unregulated exploration. Classified expeditions preceded it by 12 years. What they found has never been fully released. When the Dead Sea Scrolls surfaced at Qumran in 1947, 11 copies of Enoch came with them, more copies than most books that made it into the Old Testament. Chapter 76 of Enoch names 7 rivers running through a hidden division of the earth. The text calls it the fourth quarter. Radar just found one of those rivers under 2 miles of Antarctic ice. In the next few minutes, you'll see what the text records, what the ice hides, and why the discharge point sits inside a restricted overflight zone that dates to 1947. If forbidden biblical history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week, we uncover what Scripture recorded and Antarctica confirms. But here's what makes this stranger. The chapter we are talking about is chapter 76 in the Lawrence translation. That is the first English translation of the Book of Enoch, published by Richard Lawrence, Archbishop of Cashel, from the Ethiopic manuscript held at the Bodleian Library in Oxford. First edition in 1821. Revised edition in 1883. For almost a century, if you read Enoch in English, you read Lawrence. And in Lawrence, chapter 76 is one continuous vision. It opens with the 12 portals of the wind at the ends of the earth, and then without a break, it moves to something else. Verse 3 of chapter 76 describes a fourth quarter of the earth, divided into 3 parts. The first part is for the habitation of man. The second part contains, and this is the Lawrence rendering, seas of water and the abysses and the forests and rivers and darkness and clouds. The third part contains paradise. Verse 5. 7 high mountains, higher than all the mountains of the earth, from which frost proceeds. Verse 6. 7 rivers, greater than all rivers, one of which takes its course into a great sea. The Ethiopic Ge'ez manuscripts that carry this reading are cataloged in the West as Bodleian Bruce 74 and Bodleian Bruce 93. The Scottish explorer James Bruce brought 3 copies out of Axum in 1773 after 6 years in Abyssinia. Michael Knibb produced the modern scholarly English translation from Ge'ez at Oxford in 1978. Ephraim Isaac produced his direct rendering from the Ethiopic tradition at Oxford in 1983. Both preserve the fourth quarter. Both preserve the 7 mountains. Both preserve the 7 rivers. But the text goes deeper than the Ge'ez. At Qumran, in the caves above the Dead Sea, an Aramaic fragment survived. It is cataloged as 4Q210, formally titled 4Q Enoch Astronomical C Aramaic. It preserves, on a single fragment, the material of Enoch, chapter 76, verse 3 through verse 10, and it runs uninterrupted into what modern editors call chapter 77, verse 4. The wind portals in the fourth quarter and the 7 rivers were, in the oldest physical copy of the text we have, one document, 2nd century BC, paleographically dated, held now at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And the man who edited that fragment was Joseph Mielik. He published his Oxford edition of the Aramaic Enoch fragments in 1976. The full title is The Books of Enoch, Aramaic Fragments of Qumran Cave 4. Clarendon Press, Oxford. That volume is still the primary reference on the physical shape of the ancient text. He held additional material, working notes, interpretive drafts on the astronomical and geographical sections for the rest of his life. He died in Paris in 2006, with parts of that work incomplete. Klaus Bayer, Florentino Garcia Martinez, and Devorah Demant have worked through what he left. A full definitive treatment is still not published. Seas of water, abysses, rivers, darkness, darkness. The fourth quarter. That is the scripture side. Now the Antarctic side. Dr. Christine Dow at the University of Waterloo, Dr. Neil Ross at Newcastle University, Professor Martin Siegert at Imperial College London, working with colleagues, published in Nature Geoscience on October 27, 2022. Volume 15, pages 892 through 898. Title: Antarctic basal environment shaped by high-pressure flow through a subglacial river system. Airborne ice-penetrating radar, a modeling engine called the Glacier Drainage System. Together they mapped what nobody had mapped before: a dendritic river system, 460 kilometers long, moving high-pressure fresh water beneath the ice, longer than the Thames, feeding into the Filchner-Ronne ice shelf, discharging into the Weddell Sea. That system runs through 4 ice catchments: the Institute Ice Stream, the Mahler Ice Stream, the Support Force Glacier, and the Foundation Ice Stream, joined to the Academy Glacier. 4 tributaries, 1 system, under darkness. Dr. Dow said it plainly in the Imperial College release. Whole systems, she said, are down there. That is the paper we haven't yet opened. What we're looking at breaks into 3 parts. First, what the text names. Enoch's chapter 76 does not name a metaphor. It names a 4th quarter of the earth. It names 3 internal divisions in that quarter. It names, inside the 2nd division, seas of water, abysses, forests, rivers, darkness, and clouds. It names 7 high mountains from which frost proceeds. It names 7 rivers larger than all rivers. This is a topographical inventory. The text is behaving like a survey document. Second, what radar has now confirmed. Dow's team found high-pressure freshwater rivers under the Antarctic ice. Not standing lakes. Rivers. Moving. At the time of publication, the model discharge was roughly 24 cubic meters per second. In 2025, a follow-up paper by Ehrenfeucht and colleagues in Geophysical Research Letters revised the modeled flow upward to as much as 66 cubic meters per second across the same catchments. That is not a slow trickle. That is a working river. The word that keeps appearing in the papers is dendritic. Dendritic means branching, tree-shaped. A main channel receives smaller feeder channels along its length, which in turn receive still smaller ones. That is how rivers on the surface of the earth grow. That is what the radar found under the ice. Not a single line of water, a tree of it. The Filchner-Ronne ice shelf, into which the system drains, is the 2nd largest ice shelf in Antarctica. Its surface area is larger than California. Its underside is the drainage point for a substantial fraction of the West Antarctic ice sheet. What the Dow paper says, in plain terms, is that under that shelf, fresh water is moving, under high pressure, in a continuous system, from the deep interior out to the sea. Around that river, the modern Antarctic map shows what Enoch's chapter 76 also lists: subglacial lakes. As of 2025, the European Space Agency's Cryosat radar altimeter has cataloged 85 additional active subglacial lakes in Antarctica, on top of the ones already known. Seas of water. It shows abysses. The Bentley Subglacial Trench is the deepest point of any continental crust, more than 2,500 meters below sea level, buried under ice. It shows 7 high mountains. The Gamburtsev subglacial mountains rise to more than 2,700 meters above their base. They were mapped by the AJAP survey, published in Nature by Dr. Fausto Ferraccioli and colleagues at the British Antarctic Survey in 2011, using airborne ice-penetrating radar of the same class Dow's team later used on the Weddell catchments. The mountains were never eroded down. They stand under the ice. From frost, they proceed. Third, the point where the text and the radar meet. There is more than one reading of what Enoch's cosmology assumes. Some scholars argue the 4th quarter presupposes a fixed physical geography with a specific southern extremity. Others treat the phrase as a directional and cosmological convention of the Second Temple period. What neither reading disputes is that the specific bundle of features the text names Seas of water and abysses and forests and rivers and darkness, together with 7 mountains and 7 rivers, resolves on any modern map to one location. And that location is East Antarctica, under a ceiling of ice more than 2 kilometers thick. The mainstream response is that Chapter 76 is meteorological allegory, winds, portals, symbolic numbers. That is a reasonable literary reading. But it does not account for verse 3. Verse 3 does not name winds. It names topography. It names what is inside the 4th quarter, not what blows out of it. And that topography has now been found. The coordinates the text gives are not symbolic. They resolve to a specific point. Under the ice, at the discharge coordinate where the Dow River exits, this is what modern surveys have mapped. A high-pressure freshwater outlet running for 460 kilometers through darkness, ending at the Filchner-Ronne ice shelf. Not meteorological allegory, not symbolic geography. The 4th quarter. Researchers have tried to argue coincidence. They say rivers and abysses are generic ancient imagery, present in every cosmological text of the period. That is a fair opening, but there is a problem. Enoch's list is not generic. It is a bundle. 7 rivers, 7 mountains, a quarter divided into 3 parts, one of which contains the abyss and one of which contains paradise. That precise structure is unique to the Enochic corpus. And the modern subglacial map of Antarctica, as we now have it, contains the same architecture. The suppression starts at the Council of Laodicea in 364 AD. That is the year the church removed Enoch from the biblical canon. The official reason given at the time was that the book contained excessive material on the Watchers, the fallen angels who taught mankind forbidden knowledge. The deeper reason was that Enoch made checkable claims about geography that contradicted church cosmology. Around 400 AD, Jerome, compiling the Latin Vulgate, described the book as apocryphal in a dismissive preface line. Augustine, in City of God, argued that the very specificity of Enoch's material was proof of its fraudulence. The Ethiopian church, operating outside of Roman jurisdiction, kept Enoch as scripture. That is why the Geza text survived at all. That is why James Bruce could bring 3 copies back in 1773. And that is where the second suppression begins. Because Lawrence, in 1821 and again in 1883, translated the text as one continuous chapter 76, wind portals in 4th quarter and 7 rivers in one vision. Charles, in his standard 1906 edition, in his revised 1917 edition, split them. In Charles, the wind portals stayed in chapter 76. The 4th quarter and the rivers moved to chapter 77. The Aramaic Qumran fragment preserves them as one document. The Geza preserves them as one document. Charles, quietly, editorially, broke them apart. The specific claim that Enoch's chapter 76 names a river is textually defensible in the older translation. It is obscured in the newer one. That is what suppression looks like when it is done well. And the second suppression starts 12 years before the Antarctic Treaty was signed. Operation High Jump, 1946 to 1947. 13 ships, 4,700 personnel, commanded by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Scheduled for 6 to 8 months, aborted after 8 weeks. In an interview published in the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio on March 5, 1947, Byrd referred to enemies capable of flying, in his phrase, from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Sections of the High Jump Report, Annex 3, were classified for decades. Operation Windmill followed in 1947 and 1948. The Bunger Hills were discovered. Publication was delayed. In 1954, Byrd went on the Longines Chronoscope television program and referred to an enemy from the polar regions. He died in 1957. No follow-up interview was granted. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959, entered force in 1961. Article 4 froze territorial claims. Independent survey work became structurally difficult from that point forward. The permit environment tightened. In 2012, Russian drilling into subglacial Lake Vostok was suspended under contested circumstances, and biosample data was released only in fragments. One suppression started in 364 AD. The other started in 1947. Both suppressed the same thing. But what the standard translation hides is this. The Aramaic fragment at Qumran 4Q210 is not just old, it is decisive. It preserves the wind portals of chapter 76, in the fourth quarter of chapter 76, in the 7 rivers of chapter 76, as a single continuous document. 2nd century BC. That is not a scribal accident. That is not a copyist joining unrelated material. That is the oldest surviving copy showing us the shape of the original text. And the original text treated the winds and the quarters and the rivers as one vision. Melik worked from photographs and from direct examination of the fragments themselves. His reconstruction of 4Q210 shows the wind portals, the fourth quarter, and the 7 rivers on the same piece of parchment, not on separate scraps joined by conjecture, on one document. That is the physical bottom line of the manuscript record. Charles, in 1917, broke that unity. Modern chapter divisions still follow him. So when you read a contemporary edition of Enoch, chapter 76 looks like a meteorological catalog, and the rivers appear over the page under a new chapter heading. The connection is severed on the printed page. It is not severed in the Aramaic. The rivers were always in chapter 76. They still are, if you read Lawrence, or if you hold the Qumran fragment up to the light. The topographical claim in Enoch chapter 76 is not a single feature. It is a system. Seas of water, abysses, forests, rivers, darkness, clouds, 7 mountains from which frost proceeds, 7 rivers larger than all rivers. That is 8 distinct features listed as coexisting inside one hidden quarter. The modern subglacial map of Antarctica contains all 8, not by chance in isolated locations, in the same region, under the same ice ceiling, feeding the same drainage. Between the paleographic date of 4Q210 and the publication of Dow's paper is a span of more than 2,100 years. In that entire interval, the geographical claim of Enoch chapter 76 could not be checked. It described a hidden quarter under darkness with seas of water and rivers. No one could visit. No one could sample. Then in October 2022, from an aircraft flying over the Weddell catchments, airborne radar produced the answer. The claim resolved. 2,100 years to verification. Here's what the declassified pages show. The Dow paper is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of an argument. When Aaron Feucht and colleagues extended the modeling in 2025, they found that the flow rates are higher than Dow originally reported. 66 cubic meters per second at the Foundation ice stream in Academy Glacier system. That is a substantial river. The kind of river that carves. The kind that, if surface melt ever reaches the base of the ice sheet, could tip Antarctica toward what the paper called a Greenland-like state. The Weddell Sea catchment alone holds enough ice to raise global sea level by 4.3 meters. That is the stake. If Enoch's fourth quarter comes above the ice, coastlines everywhere change. That is why the paper matters. That is why the follow-up field campaign has not been permitted. In the Filchner-Ronne overflight zone, above the river's discharge point, has been access restricted continuously since high jump. Not the north, as any modern map draws it. Not the south. The fourth quarter. Skeptics point out that Enoch's cosmology cannot be forced to match modern geography. That is fair. But nothing in this script forces the cosmology onto a modern surface. The claim is narrower. Enoch's chapter 76 names a topographical bundle. Seas of water, abysses, forests, rivers, darkness, clouds, 7 high mountains from which frost proceeds, 7 rivers larger than all rivers, Radar has now confirmed that this bundle exists at exactly one location on the modern map, under 2 kilometers of Antarctic ice, draining into a sea that no independent survey team has entered without a sponsor nation permit. Now, here's where it gets active. The permit environment is not historical. It is present tense. The United States National Science Foundation Office of Polar Programs runs a permit process that is publicly documented. Denials and multi-year delays for independent teams requesting access to the Weddell catchments are on the record. The Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center at Ohio State University holds Byrd's expedition archives. Pages of the 1947 high jump diary are still redacted. Freedom of Information Act requests over decades have not fully released them. In 2012, the Russian Arctic and Antarctic Research Institute in St. Petersburg drilled into subglacial Lake Vostok. The breakthrough was announced. The biosample results were released in fragments contested by other laboratories and never fully reconciled in a single peer-reviewed synthesis. The lake sits inside East Antarctica, not far, geologically speaking, from the interior source of the Dow River. In the same year, 2012, a British team led by Professor Martin Siegert of Imperial College London, the same Siegert who later co-authored the Dow River paper, attempted to drill into subglacial Lake Ellsworth in West Antarctica. Equipment failure ended the campaign. It was never restarted. 2 subglacial lake drilling programs on opposite sides of the continent, both suspended in the same calendar year for different official reasons. The pattern is on the record whether or not the reasons are. In 2025, the Aaron Foyt modeling paper appeared in Geophysical Research Letters. The paper confirms Dow's system and raises the flow rate. What the paper does not do, because it cannot, is put a physical instrument on the riverbed. Doing that would require an approved field campaign in the specific catchments Dow mapped. That campaign has not been publicly funded and permitted. 65 years since the treaty. 3 years since the paper. The river is on the map. Nobody is being cleared to walk to it. Why? That is the unresolved question. The map exists. The passage exists. The convergence is not the mystery. The suppression of both is. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying there is a literal doorway to the underworld beneath the Filchner-Ronne ice shelf. I'm not saying Enoch had a satellite. What we have to confront is the simplest explanation that fits the evidence. Chapter 76 of the Book of Enoch names a topographical bundle inside a hidden quarter of the earth. Seas of water, abysses, forests, rivers, darkness. 7 high mountains from which frost proceeds. 7 rivers larger than all rivers. Modern airborne radar has now confirmed that this bundle exists at exactly one location on any modern map. Under 2 kilometers of Antarctic ice. Draining into the Weddell Sea, sealed above by an overflight restriction that predates the Antarctic Treaty by 12 years. Bruce 93 remains at the Bodleian Library in Oxford, glass-cased, climate-controlled. 4Q210 remains at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, in a sealed vitrine. Byrd's high jump diary remains in Ohio, with pages still redacted. The 460-kilometer river remains under Antarctic ice. Mapped on a paper, unreachable in the field. The verse is still there. The 4th quarter. The rivers are still described. The 4th quarter. The radar has found them. The 4th quarter. The ice is still sealed above them. The 4th quarter. 460 kilometers of fresh water under high pressure. Draining into a sea no independent team has been cleared to enter. Exactly where the Book of Enoch's chapter 76 said the rivers would be, and in a text the church removed from the Bible 17 centuries ago, 7 were named.